Welcome back to Young Martin's Reels, and I'm back here again with Logan Stewart. And this particular set of lures that we're going to deal with are Corpus Christi.
Yeah, so everything in this case is from the greater Corpus Christi area. Some of them might be from Ingleside, but for the most part, it is Corpus Christi. So this case I made is more of an identification case, because a lot of people who aren't in collecting would have trouble distinguishing a lot of these lures. A lot of these lures look very similar.
I noticed that.
Yeah, and I intentionally laid them out in a way that you could see the similarities. And this is meant to be a way for you to maybe look in your old tackle box and identify what you have.
Okay.
So from left to right, top to bottom.
We're going to zoom in again because we want to be able to.
So I'm going to start.
Okay.
So this lure right here, we're going to start out is the Rudy's Bingo Bubble. This was made by Bingo Bait Company for Rudy Greiger, the famous fisherman.
It kind of looks like a casting plug.
Yeah, so this is it's like for weighting and plugging. It's something they did out in like Galveston. A lot of times they'd actually have a trailer spoon with it. And if you look at it, it's really a plastic spoon or two plastic spoons held together like that. So it's I'll hold it at an angle so
does
you
it
can
float?
kind of see. I believe it
Looks like
does. It should float. I've never actually fished one. They're a little bit on the expensive side to fish.
Oh, really?
Chet Cuvion is someone to ask about these if you ever wanted to learn more. And then we're gonna go one over, and this is a pappy. This is an Old English pappy. So Old English is the lure company that became Bingo. So I might say Bingo or Old English interchangeably in this video, which probably is not the most correct thing to do. But this is an early Bingo lure, if you would say. I would say it's Old English, but that's a solid plastic. And you'll see there's kind of like a flash like insert in there.
Okay.
And then we're going to come over.
Let's back up just a second. I noticed this one doesn't have a hook on it. Did it not come with a hook, or was it something you added to it later?
No, so it did come with the hook, so it just got taken off. A lot of Bingo collectors specifically, because the hooks are easy to remove without hurting the lure, and you can add them and take them off, a lot of collectors just take them off for case reasons. I don't specifically do that, but I also don't take the time and effort to put them back on.
Okay.
Just because it is kind of nice when they don't have the hooks, because it makes it easier to fit in the
Makes
case.
it a lot easier to put in and pin, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I don't take them off, but I don't put them back on either usually.
Okay.
So this one over, this is a Bingo floater. They're always called a floater, although some of them you'll find with a lead right underneath that screw. And those would actually sink, but as far as collectors are concerned, they call it a floater or a twist. Then one over, we have the Bingo flash. So what's different about this from the pappy is it will look very similar, but it'll have the fin. Then one over, we're going away from Bingo Bait Company now, and this is an Amtac. This is called a Texan. Amtac is short for American Tackle. These were made in the late 50s, maybe bled into the 60s, but they were made in the 50s, which I think is surprising to some people because it looks fairly modern. It was really ahead of its time.
I could have any one of those lures, and I told you I've got hundreds that I thought were modern plastic lures. I could have any one of those in my box and not even know it because they kind of look very similar to modern lures. So.
And one thing I want to clarify is not all old lures are valuable. Many things in this case are going to be under $20, and some of them might only be worth $5-10.
Okay.
But some of them are more expensive, but I'm not necessarily here to talk prices right now. And then we're going to come down to this row, and I'm going to skip one over real quick. This is a first generation Pico perch. Now, you might remember in the last video, I talked about that plastic Pico perch.
Right.
This is the first generation, and the way you can tell that is it still has this screw kind of line tie. It has spade hardware. It doesn't have a gap for the hook. Those are all things that came later. And you might be wondering how you differentiate this from a Nichols piggy perch, which the plastic version would be the last version before this. And really the only two ways are it's generally Pico should be marked Pico on the belly. If it's not marked, it's probably Nichols. And then usually the Nichols ones have a washer underneath the screw line tie, while this one does not.
Okay.
This one's a bit rough. I could upgrade it, but I haven't done that yet. And then here's a later era Pico perch. I just have this in the case to help show the differences. So you'll see it's later because the hardware is not that bigger spade hardware. There is, I don't know if it comes up on the video, but there is a little nook for the hook to go in. You have the wire line tie. And it probably has Pico actually molded in onto the belly, but it might be on the other side, so it won't show in this video. And now we're gonna go to some very similar looking lures, and these were made by Sportsman. This is a flash perch. The flash perch came in 2 sizes. The larger size you'll see very shortly. These were made by Sportsman Lure Company in Corpus Christi. This is the larger size flash perch. Here's there, but it's not cold. And then this is a talking perch, same company. The difference between the flash and the talking, oh, you probably can't hear it on video, but
It's got a rattle.
It's got a big thump and rattle.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what I expected when I shook the whole case. You're just gonna hear hooks going back and forth. All right, but that's it for the tailless perch. Well, actually, there's one more. That one didn't fit on that row, so we're gonna go down here. This is the Sportsman Perky Perch, and what's different about this one is it kind of comes down. It has that little...
Right, it's got like a little lip on it.
Yeah, it's got a lip. It did come in a larger size. Give me 1 second. I bought one of these today in the larger size because I did not have one.
So therefore you had to buy one.
I had to buy one. If
Absolutely.
you don't have it, you have to buy one. That's the rule.
That's the rule. If you don't have it, you have to buy one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, and then one over. This is the Amtac Pokey. So you saw the Amtac lure at the top earlier, the Texan. This is their perch style lure. Yeah, that was this one. Yeah. So these 2 lures are made by the same company. Then one over, we have the Fred Farmer Boogie Red Perch.
Fred Farmer.
Fred Farmer, yes sir. These were made in the late 40s, probably into the 50s. These are a classic. A lot of people like to collect these. You'll see where the lead is right there. It's exposed. A lot of these old Texas coastal lures had the lead, you know, underneath the eyes, and generally speaking, salt water makes that corrode, and that's where you usually get the exposed lead. Collectors usually look for ones that don't have the exposed lead when possible. This one is a plug-in shorty deep runner. It's a deep runner because the wings go this way. On the shallow runner, the wings go this way, keep it, you know, from sinking down lower. I have some. I don't have them in this case because the wings make it hard to fit. On the deep runner, they're thinner. You know, they don't stick out as far. On the shallow runner, they stick out much farther. Oh, and one thing I'll say is plug-in shorty is a kind of, it is a part of Old English and Bingo Bait Company. I guess is what you would say. Someone probably can better explain that relationship. Anton Stetner, Plug-in Short, who's nicknamed Plug-in Shorty, was a business partner with Doug English. So I guess you would say the Plug-in Shorty is a bingo lure, but there's probably some nuance to that I am not going to explain here. This is a Bobo perch. We actually do not know for sure who made the Bobo. I think we know who made them later, but we don't know who invented them.
Okay.
These were made in Houston, and I think possibly earlier they were made in Corpus, but there's a lot of research going into that. There's still a lot of things collectors don't know and are learning all the time. Then this is a Bingo Lucky You. I don't know much to say about this. It's another perch style lure made by Bingo Bait Company. We've kind of discussed them pretty much a lot, and we'll continue to discuss them because Bingo was one of the most prominent lure companies in Corpus Christi. Pico, Bingo, and Sportsman are probably the 3 biggest lure companies of Corpus for a long time. That's a plug-in shorty shrimp in the large size, the medium size, the small size, and it has a side weight, which indicates that this is an earlier version. And then this is another one in the small size, but this one's a deep runner. So you'll see the wings are coming down as opposed to the shallow runner shrimp where the wings are going up. This is a Sportsman wiggling shrimp. This one's painted in Christmas tree color. This is a Wits shrimp. I don't think we know a whole lot about the Wits shrimp. There's another shrimp called the Bobo shrimp, which looks identical and has eyes. It's almost certain that they're somehow related to each other. I mean, like, they're like the same lure, basically. But there's probably some history there that we don't know and might not ever know. Then below, we have a Sportsman Dixie Dandy. These are made by Sportsman Lure Company. The person who made Sportsman, his name is Dick Dickens. He made a ton of different models of lures.
I don't know that lure will catch a fish, but it's pretty neat looking.
I like the Dixie Dandies. You know, this is actually a very affordable lure to collect. And the Sportsman's compared to the Bingos, if you're talking about lures of the same rarity, you know, if you're talking about a bingo that there's only 5 examples of, and a Sportsman where there's only 5 examples of, the Sportsman will be significantly cheaper. So if someone likes coastal baits, that is probably a good entry-level bait or company to collect. Do not get me wrong, they still get expensive. There are such thing as $400 and $500 Sportsman lures, but a lure like this you could probably pick up for around $10. This is a bingo swimmer, or an Old English swimmer. These are earlier. Earlier bingos have the lead in the eye. Later ones get it below the chin. And then Houston era, usually they're encapsulated within the bait. Bingo B. This is one of the smaller sizes of bingo. Yeah, I mean, we've discussed them quite a lot. I am pretty sure this is an early bingo. And I don't know
this one. Is there a weight under that eye?
There's a weight under the chin.
Under the chin.
You can see it better from my angle.
Okay,
than
from
yours.
your side you can. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure this is an early bingo, unless it's an early Bobo. I'd actually have to double check on this. Not much of a good ID case if you can't ID everything in it, right? The knowledge is the key part. And then this is the only hump lure I have in this case. This is a Hump B6. The company was owned by Earl Humphreys. They made the B series, the A series, the M series, the F series, and the SM series. And those are the A series and the B series are these chubby minnow style bodies. And then the M series would be probably more similar to this, although not that, that's a Sportsman. And then the SM would be a very small, I think they're called, SM's probably short for small mighty, I know, but I'm not a hump expert. Don't take anything I say as fact. And then the F series is like the M series, but they have a flash in them, which is why they're called the F series.
Okay, now let me ask you, these are primarily Corpus Christi lures. How were they marketed nationally, or were they marketed mostly local?
I would say coastal. I would say coastal. So you can find bingo lures, and it depends on it really depends company for company. But for the most part, if we're talking bingo and Sportsman, you can find them across the Gulf Coast, and they were sold outside of Texas. Some of the others, like the Wits shrimp, I would imagine really only can be found in Texas. You know, the more obscure you're talking, the smaller the company, the more likely it was local. But humps, bingos, and Sportsmans you can find across the Gulf Coast. They certainly were sold in other states. And, you know, I don't have exact time frames for that. Maybe the very early stuff was not, and the later stuff was. But I certainly know you can find it across the Gulf Coast. In the same way you can find Florida lures in Texas tackle boxes.
All right, now let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
How long have you been collecting?
I've been collecting about 2.5 years, 3 years maybe. I am very avid, though, which is why I've acquired so much.
That's a lot of information to have gleaned in a 2-year period.
Yeah. Well, I like to learn. I do have a good memory. So usually I remember what I hear, and I've done my best to learn about this stuff. And yeah, you know, it's my hobby. You don't really host a lure show without really liking it.
Right. And I've heard people today talking, because you're pretty young. I don't know how old you are, but you're pretty young.
I'm 25. I'll say it.
25. Okay, you're 25. But I've heard people today when they were talking, and I've heard the comment. Well, let's ask Logan. Maybe he knows about lures. And it's like, well, okay, and you've only been in it for 2 years, so it's
probably closer to 3 now.
What got you started?
You know, it's funny. I bought a bunch of tackle just to fish with, and in there's some old lures, and I was researching them, and it was a lot of work to research them, and it might have been Stockholm syndrome that made me stick with it. The lure that got me started on collecting nickels was there's a Plunko minnow, a Nichols Plunko minnow, in that lot, and because it's a Corpus lure, most people around the nation are not familiar with it. So I was researching everywhere. There's almost no information online. And eventually I emailed multiple collectors, and finally someone recognized it, and it took so much work that I was like, that's pretty cool, especially since I grew up fishing in Corpus Christi. Okay. So, so that's really why I got into it, or some of the vague reason why I got into it. But, and if anybody has any questions about Texas lures or lure collecting and wants to reach out to me, I'll give Rick my contact information. He's welcome to put it in the video description. If you have stuff that you've inherited, want to learn more about it,
I'd be happy. There's a good pickup for you, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you know, I like to help people. I want people to know what they have, and if anybody's interested in getting into collecting, I'd be happy to, help them out as best as I can.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.